I want to begin by thanking you guys for watching my video. If you support my work, please make sure you go into the description of this video and check out my Linktree link. If you click on that link, it'll expand and you can see all different ways that you can support my work financially. Otherwise, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe this video and leave me a comment. If you do those things, it really helps me out in the ratings and make sure that YouTube will put me to the front of the list when anybody searches certain topics. So again, if you want to support me financially, click on the Linktree link. Otherwise, like, share, and subscribe. All of that helps me out a whole lot. Thanks, and enjoy the video. One of the biggest mistakes that we can make with our ascension and becoming better at both using magic, becoming magic, and reaching higher is if we fall back upon bad habits. Many of us come into the left-hand path from some other spiritual tradition. Most people who begin a practice of magic or left-hand path demonolatry come from a very theistic background. Most people are Christian, and they come from a perspective where there is an all-seeing, all-knowing God which they must fall upon their knees and worship. I've said before, and I'll say again, one of the worst things that you can do is simply invert that right-hand path theism and become a left-hand path theist. Now, me personally, my relationship to the spirit world is to understand them as a reflection of, a creation of, a mask for divine aspects of the cosmos, of the omniverse. And the masks exist within the collective consciousness of both humanity and our own hidden consciousness. They are masks for our own archetypes. And make no mistake, they are human archetypes. Now, generally speaking, the goal here is not to worship, is not to fall down in supplication and make these new gods for yourself, which you must follow to the ends of the earth. No. Not even as some kind of gift or honor to them would I recommend this. I don't see any single one of the spirits that I work with as superior to me. I don't see any of them as somehow something which I must displace my own ego and will and intention and intuition. Instead, each of these are guides. They're like spirit guides in a more pagan, or I should say, animistic culture. When Native Americans or Native Europeans or Shintoists or several other cultures, say from Africa, imbue reality with natural spirits, they use them as familial guides, often treating them as a kind of member of the family. They can be cherished, they can be beloved. But the ultimate goal of what I do and what I tend to, I don't want to say preach, but that I find valuable, is to teach a system of theurgy. Theurgy is not a process in which we give up ourselves. At least not this version. Left-hand theurgy is where we discover our true nature. It's quite compatible, at least the version that I practice, with certain Eastern traditions, including things like Zen. You'll notice that I've been wearing mala a lot more often lately because I've been returning to some of my meditative practices more. There's been a lot of emotional stresses and things that have kind of grounded me out and put me back into a very egocentric position in life, where I actually feel a little too much suffering. And of course, I have the saying, we suffer primarily because we think we ought not to. Theurgy is an art in which a mere mortal can become attuned to their divinity by the example and assistance via either magic or emulation or whatever system you like, synthesis really. By some form of synthesis, you become more like those divinities which you aspire and interact with. Be they infernal, diabolical divinities, be they lofty divinities whose energy is just light and joy all the time. Now, me personally, as a left-hand path occultist, people make the mistake and think that I only am interested in the dark side. The dark side is more interesting to me, for certain. It's certainly the aesthetic that I prefer. And I do believe that darkness is what contains everything. Darkness is the fertile womb of reality, and light is the seed. The sinister side is that dark side. It is that womb. And the left-hand path is a receptive form of self-identification. It is an individualized system. It is a system where you become the divine, not where you worship the divine. Now, there's multiple paths to this, of course. But what I'm trying to get at here, you may have even noticed in my own practices, I'm not talking about the spirits so much lately. Now, today, I had a wonderful experience, although brief, where I allowed myself, whatever blockages have been going on because of the various things that are on my mind, I allowed myself to connect with Belial, or Belial, or however you like to pronounce it. Most people like to say Belial. And what I was doing was communicating with that Belial that is part of me, that is me. That internal Belial, that Belial which is that sort of worthless demon, that's sort of angsty, sort of, I don't want to say lazy by any stretch, but certainly has this air of emo-ness, we'll say. But it's brutally honest, and is certainly superior at teaching you to have your own power, your own grace, your own kingship, your own authority. One of the things that the Goetia points out about Belial is that Belial will grant you authorities. And as usual, Belial is most easily invoked for me, like many of the higher kings, especially like Lucifer, Belial. A mirror, be it a bathroom mirror or an intentional scrying mirror, or like the ones that I sell through my Etsy store. They work really well at connecting with this aspect of the self. And when you connect with that aspect inside you, the collective consciousness aspect of Belial can be syncretized. It's like you're tuning in on a radio. In order to get a radio to work, you have to tune the dial, and somewhere in the mechanism, depending upon the type of radio it is, something is adjusting so that it's picking up a wavelength. It's picking up a frequency of radiation. And in much the same way, you have to tune your own consciousness. You have to be in that same mood. This is why so much of spiritual invocation, even evocation, requires that you set the mood, that you do things to get yourself to be a tuning fork. If you know anything about how tuning forks work, if you take two tuning forks and you strike one on the table, it'll hum and it'll vibrate. And if you bring it into close enough proximity to another one, the other one will start to do the same thing, and they'll harmonize. Even though you didn't strike that one, they will both take on the sound. They will both begin to vibrate. In much the same way, you must do this. And this is essentially what theurgy does. And over a long enough period of time, you become resonant with that divinity that you have been reaching out to. Now, sometimes that resonance is temporary. And sometimes that resonance isn't really in alignment with what you're supposed to be learning and achieving on your path in life. Now remember, if you understand the philosophy that I live under, the path does not have a destination. It just has a direction. It doesn't have a final outcome. It doesn't have a solution. There is no ending. It's a convoluted circle that never ends. It only ends when you decide to stop walking it. The point is not to achieve something, it is to be, it is to experience and become aware. It is mindfulness, both in the singular sense where you can become mindful of a single moment or thing, and mindful in a much broader way. My goal is not to become divinity. It is to recognize that I already am divinity, that anything that makes me feel less than divine is part of the illusion. And it is a choice that I've made to experience that so that I can have this fulfilling adventure where I'm D.H. Thorne becoming divine. And maybe D.H. Thorne's ghost. Whatever comes after that, quote unquote. Because there is no after, there is no before, there is only now. So, working with spirits should never be done in a way that makes you their worshiper, in my opinion. Some of you will differ. Some of you will say, well, I haven't reached that point yet. Maybe you're that self-aware that you realize it's not really that you can't, it's that you don't feel self-aware enough yet. You don't feel confident enough yet spiritually to be on your own. You still want a master. You still want a God. And so you will fall down in worship and get a patron for yourself and follow that patron like anyone would do with a good teacher. And this is permissible. And on the left-hand path, my position would simply be, so long as that submission is not something that you do out of a sense of compulsion, like you're being forced to do it. So long as that submission is done by choice. In other words, so long as you ultimately have the power to both kneel and stand up, though I don't personally advocate it, it is permissible. It is not wrong. It is not foolish. I've often said that both the left and right-hand path will eventually lead to the truth. There is no better. There's only better for me. I believe that for me and those who resonate with my messages, the left-hand path is the way to go. It is the one that achieves the most liberation in a short amount of time, with the least amount of pain, agony. No, scratch that. With a lot of pain and agony, but leads to the greatest amount of liberation, which in itself is a relief and will release you from a lot of pain and suffering. There's a parable about a woman in Japan who her son or child had died. And she went to, I don't remember if it's the Buddha or just someone who was really like a master or whatever, and asked them for a cure to her suffering, the suffering of losing her child. And the master told the woman to go, and to cure her suffering, she would have to get a mustard seed, a handful of mustard seeds, from any home in the entire countryside in which there was never anyone in the family who died, or a friend died, or anything like that. And of course, she couldn't find anyone. She tried. She looked everywhere. She figured somewhere there's a household where someone hasn't died. Maybe, something like that. Nope. Every single person had someone that they've lost. And every single household had someone who died. Of course, during that time, people would live and die in their homes. They didn't go to like a hospital and die. So it's quite likely you'd die at home. Someone would. And you'd probably have the same home for generations. So she couldn't find anyone. And she returned back to that master. And in that discovery that suffering is both in our expectations and experiences, and that the inspirations for suffering are universal among everyone, she was relieved a bit. She gained the peace. She gained the cure she was looking for. The left-hand path is the path that sets you on looking for that suffering, looking for it by not having taboos, certainly not extreme taboos anyway. We're not very moralistic people. If we have any taboos, they're self-choices that we've made, and they're educated choices. They're ethical. They're not moralistic. They're not dogmatically moralistic. They're ethical in the, I've thought about this, I've come to a philosophical conclusion. So I'm not going to tell you that it's immoral to worship a spirit. I'm simply telling you that falling down in worship and becoming dependent upon spirits is not the way to go. It is important, therefore, to limit how long, in my opinion, you make a spirit a patron. Now, on another level, people get bored of things. I'm the type of person that I've got to keep moving. I can't stand when anything is like, if I'm locked into the same discipline for years, it drives me nuts. For me to, say, pick Lucifer as a patron and only work with Lucifer as my primary patron forever, even though Lucifer and I probably have the most in common and gain the most from him, or I have gained the most from him. In fact, the fact that I've gained the most from him is probably time for me to let him go. And I kind of have. I still come back to him, but my point is that I don't worship Lucifer and I don't expect anything from him. Instead, I look to him for inspiration. And I come back to that only when I need that inspiration, only when I feel like I can't find it within myself. And sometimes I don't find it in Lucifer either. Sometimes I can only find it in the mundane world. The spirit world is a world without physical limitation because there is no physicality to it. Anything that you can imagine is real. Unlike the material world, where just because you can imagine it doesn't mean that it will come true. There's physical limitations here in the material side of the world. In the spiritual side of the world, there are conceptual limitations. What you can conceive of is the limitation. That doesn't mean that's all there is, it just means that's all you can experience. And the spiritual world will teach you new experiences, will teach you new things by showing you disparate ideas. Working with, we'll say, Yahweh for half of my life, and now working with Lucifer? People come to me, and they're theistic Satanists, or they're some other kind of really fanatical left-hand path person, and they hear that I don't curse Yahweh every chance I get. They think it's strange. Well, they're still caught up in that dichotomy. They're still caught up in that trap. They're still living a Christian life. They've just replaced one for the other. I was there for a little while in life, certainly for a short time. What I've learned is that my time as a Christian taught me things that my time as a Luciferian would never teach me. And my time as a Luciferian has taught me things that my time as, say, a Zen Buddhist wouldn't teach me. And my time as a Zen Buddhist has taught me things neither would ever teach me. And I've never been formally a Zen Buddhist, by the way. It's simply a style of practice that I appreciate. So my time in all of these different things was temporary. I'm no longer a Christian. I'm no longer whatever. I'm D.H. Thorne, dark occultist, dark mystic. That's what I am. I'm an aspect of divinity. I am my own mask of divinity. And none of these spirits are meant to take that place for me. All of these things, because they exist within your living world, are temporary. You are not meant to, well, maybe you personally feel meant to. I'm not meant to devote my life to any one spirit. And so for a time, I put them down, and then I pick them back up, and I put them down. I will do different forms of magic. I'll do different forms of spirituality. I will pretend magic isn't real again. I will pretend magic is real again. I'll pretend the spirits are just my imagination, and then I'll pretend that they're physically real beings that float around me. Whatever it takes for me to gain some new perspective, because that shift in perspective is the journey. Even if that perspective is inaccurate for a time or disagrees with an older perspective, the point is to keep, like a shark circling something it wants to eat, is to keep just constantly trying to get as much perspective on what is as possible. Because when you do so, you begin to see through the facade a little bit. You begin to realize how illusory it really is, how something can be so true one minute and then not true another, and nothing has really changed. You're just as rational and logical as you've always been. I have the same, we'll say, rational requirements for what I think now as I did before. It's just that instead of requiring things to be physically provable, I expect things to be spiritually provable. Whereas I once was highly skeptical of spirituality because I had once been highly spiritual and got burned by it, and became highly skeptical and became fully materialist. And I realized that wasn't fulfilling. That didn't give me what I needed. That didn't give me peace. That didn't give me what I expected. Certainly not the power that I demanded. By doing another turn and now merging the two philosophies, merging things, having a rational view of spirituality has been way better for me. And maybe someday I will completely shift again. Maybe someday I'll go back to being fully spiritual or fully materialistic. Maybe in 10 years you'll be watching this channel and I won't be talking about spirits and I'll be disowning the fact that I ever did any of this. It is possible. I don't hold that apart from what is possible. I think that's entirely possible. So I'm not sure what to call this video. I was originally going to make this video just a video telling you not to put all your eggs in the basket of spirituality, to not feel this kind of permanent devotion to any god or demon or anything like that. That the goal is for you. The goal is for you to become what you are, for you to become aware of what you are, for you to use different perspectives to become what you are, to become aware of it. If working with King Paimon every day for your life does that, then do so. My guess, though, is that working with any spirit forever robs you of that. They become right-hand path solutions, and they become bigger parts of the delusion. Now, the path of the right-hand path, in my opinion, teaches you to see through the delusion by becoming so delusional that at some point it becomes absurd and your soul snaps and says, this can't be real. It's like trying to beat your head into the wall to get more sense into it. Eventually you're going to go, you know what, that hurts. And in that moment, you've gotten sense. It's the old saying, a fool who persists in his folly will eventually become wise. And both apply to both the left and right path. Both are the same. They both lead to that same truth. It's just they do it differently. The left-hand path tends to be more yielding about what is, despite being so assertive about what you are. It tends to be more receptive to experience, while at the same time asserting the identity within that is doing the experiencing. Whereas the right-hand path is one where you're taught to be receptive to only one thing, and it is not what's around you all the time. It's one source, one God, one divinity, one doctrine, and the self is transmutated and destroyed. Anyway, guys, I'm not going to make this video go on any longer. Hope you guys enjoyed the point of this video. If you do like what I'm doing, make sure you like, share, and subscribe, as I said earlier. My Etsy store does have some interesting new products, including some skulls, which I have painted. One of them sold. I have one left. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and check it out. In the meantime, until next time, mind the shadows.